Welcome to Ask a Celebrant, a conversational podcast answering your questions relating to all the commemoration and celebrations of all the chapters of your life. I'm Berni B, full life celebrant.
And I'm Dinah Liversidge. Hi everyone, it's Dinah and
I'm Berni, hi.
We're in my little office today. We love to get together to have these conversations where we just talk about things in our industry that really matter to us.
Absolutely, gosh, there's so many things that really matter to us.
There are, aren't there? And today in particular, partly spurred by the fact that we're writing a series of articles at the moment together, which I have to say is a joy. We're doing that for the British Institute of Funeral Directors. So it's partly that that's made us say, let's get together and talk about what we're going to write about. But I think it's just something that we talk about together a lot.
We do, yeah.
And that's inclusivity, but specifically when we're thinking about funerals. And we wanted to cover this, and it's one of those topics I suspect we could talk about for days, but we're going to spend about 30 minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, we're good at talking, but we can usually get to a natural conclusion in about 30 minutes, aren't we?
I think, really.
I think, yeah. And inclusivity is such a massive, all-encompassing, which is funny, inclusivity, all-encompassing subject to talk about. But I think when we start thinking about it in terms of funerals, I think we're so busy within the funeral industry just getting swept along with the grief and the need. We haven't necessarily looked outside that to the additional needs and support that we could provide just to make that process and that community of grievers, because it's all about community and ritual and grievers, to make it accessible to all of the people who need to grieve within that community.
You put that, as always, you put that beautifully, and it is exactly that, isn't it? We're all focusing on everybody is grieving. Mm-hmm. But we forget people in every dynamic, in every family, in every situation we encounter, they had challenges before they were grieving.
Yes.
And how are we actually acknowledging and even asking about them? I think often that's where it begins, doesn't it? That first meeting.
Yeah.
Are we saying to families, is there anybody in the family group or the broader community that perhaps we need to know about early on, so that we can make sure we're accommodating what they need to make this accessible to them?
Absolutely. I mean, like with everything, I mean, everybody experiences things differently anyway.
Yes.
Even if they don't have a recognised disadvantage or need within society. But I think that with funerals especially, we're so busy just producing the empathy and sympathy for that first person, our next of kin person that we're liaising with. And what we really want to do, because what we're saying to these families, we want to help you take those first steps on your rocky road of grief, and we can do that by helping your community, your tribe, to get through this first point. But to do that efficiently and as effectively as we can, we need to look at, are we being inclusive? You know, be that children, be that disabled people, be that people with accessibility issues, physically or mentally.
Yes,
we need
absolutely.
to work out what we need, and we should do it with the skill we have. And the skill we have is that we listen and we ask. And so, you know, it should be an easy thing to integrate into what we're doing.
Yes, but actually I wonder if one of the problems we have here is the sensitivity around certain parts of inclusion. There is this fear that if I get things wrong, if I ask the wrong question or use the wrong word, I might cause offence. So I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, and this is something I know you write about a lot, and it really helps.
Yeah.
Of course you may get it wrong.
Yeah.
But getting it wrong is better than not trying at all.
Absolutely. It's all about intention.
Yes.
And as long as you acknowledge if you've made the mistake, you know, be that, you know, when we were talking a lot because of Pride, we talked a lot about gender and fluidity and pronouns and all of those things, and how to refer to groups of people. And like my coach in that area said to me, you know, what suits one person might not suit another. So ask that individual, how would you prefer
Beautifully
to,
put.
you know.
And that's so important. What suits one person may not suit another.
Yeah.
If we can leave all our assumptions outside
Yeah.
about what inclusion covers,
Yeah.
who that really refers to, and see every set of individuals as needing something different, I think that means we have the right intention.
Absolutely.
And it means instantly we have a better chance of being seen as a safe space, a person they could actually openly say, yes, there are certain things we want you to consider that we've been concerned about discussing.
Yeah. And all we have to do in our first, second meeting is to say, you know, here we are, we're here to help you express your grief and loss and celebrate the life of this person that you loved or were related to and had a complex relationship with, whatever that is. We're helping you get through this step. Is there anyone in that community that is going to be participating in this that we need to consider in a different way?
Yeah.
Or anyone that you want us to be aware of, or anything that we need to be aware of to help you make this as smooth as we can.
And you illustrated that earlier when we were talking about this really beautifully, where we both were talking about, you know, one of the things you have to consider at the funeral is there a hearing loop? And we have discovered today that there is no regulation that says there has to be a hearing loop at crematorium. Each individual council or borough does their own thing. Now that strikes me as really quite concerning. If you are somebody who has hearing issues and is going to have to use that hearing loop, you shouldn't be having to check, okay, so we're going to this particular crematorium, now I need to find out whether I can hear the service or not. But maybe the FD or the celebrant can go to that trouble and make that something we automatically do. I'm going to check how accessible and inclusive my venues are.
Absolutely.
Do you have a hearing loop? Do you have a ramp? You were mentioning that we're sure that at least one crematorium we use, people in a wheelchair have to come in by a different door.
Sneaking in a back entrance.
Which seems, very outdated, doesn't it?
And also not very nice if you are the next of kin. You know, it's bad enough if you're one of the congregation come to support the next of kin.
Absolutely.
But if you're the next of kin and you can't follow.
Yeah, you can't come in with the funeral procession. That's not well thought through at all, is it?
So we have to think of these things. I think it should be in our remit as celebrants and funeral directors to it's almost like a part of a risk assessment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's not just, you know, what does our client and the extended group around our client need, and what do we have to facilitate to make that happen? And it might be that if there isn't a hearing loop, is there a way of casting the words on the screen?
Oh, great! Yeah, good idea.
So having it as
and
a readable option.
Many of them have several screens.
Yeah.
And then what about if we're graveside?
Yeah.
Now, clearly, there is no sound system graveside. No. Is there perhaps somebody who's going to be with this person who could interpret for us? Or is it something they might wish to pay for? Yeah.
Do they need a signer if someone does sign, or do we need to get a speaker?
Exactly. Could it be as simple as that, as saying, if we bothered to put a little bit of time into bringing some good quality speakers with us, would that help?
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me very recently was one of my students told me of a situation where they were graveside and the wife of the person who had died was not terribly steady on her feet. The funeral director has done this for many years and very diplomatically had noticed when he went to visit her at home that she wasn't very steady when she got up to make him a cup of tea, and had said, do you need any special assistance? Of course, pride comes into this. No, I will be absolutely fine. What was wonderful, and my graduate described this to me, was that the funeral director knew better and without saying anything had packed in the back of the hearse a fold-up, very sturdy, small chair. And as soon as we got to the side of the grave, they just popped it up, put it next to her, didn't ask. They
Yeah.
were almost, you could have said, oh, that was rude, they should have asked, but it was done very beautifully.
Yeah.
And they just seated her.
Yeah.
And when we finished, when they finished, and the graduate went and asked, was everything okay?
Yeah.
She said, I can't believe how thoughtful that was.
Yeah.
Little gestures like that,
Mm-hmm.
not overriding people, but thinking, do you know what?
Yeah.
My experience tells me graveside can be difficult for people who don't have walking issues.
Yes.
Never mind somebody who
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, and standing and walking in heat, taking umbrellas on a really sunny day.
Yes.
Particularly.
Now there's a brilliant suggestion. You see, I know of another person recently who has lupus, who was very concerned about going to her brother's funeral. And this, one of the problems people with lupus has is you get a really awful reaction to direct sunlight, and it can be very debilitating.
Yeah.
And so, because the celebrant in this occasion was aware that this was a problem, she organised to have parasols, but rather beautifully organised them for everyone.
Yeah. How
So
lovely.
the person with lupus didn't feel
Yes.
singled out. And I thought that was really clever.
Really wonderful.
That's
thing
real
to do.
inclusivity, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So we've talked about, we really skimmed over because obviously
Yes.
we haven't got that long. Thinking about different disabilities and how we can facilitate that, subtly, considerately, without singling out all of those things. But of course we have issues with children, babies, new mums, who feel like they are might be excluded because it's not appropriate to bring a baby into these places, or children with learning disabilities. We've got all the Asperger's and ADHD and all of that. How do we best integrate that kind of overwhelm, this like putting people into who don't like coming out of their routine and comfort areas or into crowds? What can we do to help them within this?
I think that's such a beautiful question, Bernie, and it's so important, isn't it? There are so many ways we can do this, from the very simple, asking if they could go to a visit. You contact your local crematorium and say, I have somebody with special needs who's coming to the service of their grandparent, for example. I know they're going to be overwhelmed if they haven't been there. Is there a time I could bring them up and show them? They are absolutely delighted, in my experience, to say, of course you can. We'd be very happy for you to do that.
I've always found the staff at crematorium really, really welcoming and
Yes.
more than happy to show people around, let you touch things, and see what's going on, explain what they are, look at the spells. Because I think if people have done that, children or adults,
Yes.
if you've done that and they know which is they're going to be their seat, where they're going to come in, where they're going to sit, where they can escape if they need to get out,
Yes.
where they can move about if they need to move about. Maybe for certain children it might be better at the back that there is some sort of something familiar to them, a blanket, a cushion, their cushions,
Lovely
whatever.
idea.
You can stick them at the back. If they need to get up and be there, they can be there. And of course, as celebrants, you said this earlier, at the beginning, voicing that. You said it in such a way.
Give people permission.
Yeah.
One of the things I love is when families have said, we've decided we're going to include children. We're going to let them come.
Yeah.
It may be that you have a child coming who has certain needs that we have to really think about. When you start the ceremony, give people permission not to worry about it. Because you and I have seen it, haven't we? You look at the congregation or the guests or the mourners, whatever you want to call them, and you can spot the ones who are concerned instantly. The carer or the parent or the responsible adult who's thinking, oh, please don't let it be my child. Everybody is turning around and telling to be quiet. and actually, I think when we give permission at the beginning and say, we all of us here are going to react differently today, and however it impacts us is absolutely okay. If you want to dance in the middle or if you want to run to the door, whatever that is okay. I think what we do is we don't just give permission to those people to stop worrying. We also silence the tutters. The ones who can't resist it. They turn around and or they huff or they go shh. And we've just said, no, not today.
And also, they're not, because some of them do it in that kind of protecting everyone else.
Yes.
I need to shut them up because this is not appropriate. I need to control this situation a little bit. It's an uncomfortable situation. Let me control it a little by showing I'm disapproving and stopping that. Whereas if we say, we know this may happen, that's fine.
Yeah, and we're totally okay with it.
I like it with people, especially when families, and we're not talking additional needs now, we're talking normal needs of new parents, people with toddlers, where they're not going to bring their children because they might cry, or they might shout out, or they might laugh, or they might, because they're watching their PlayStation or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, weird one.
And we need to say that's okay, don't we?
Don't worry, if you need to get up with the baby's crying, that's fine. This is not a performance. We're not here as a performance. This is here for us all to share emotion, and to be honest, it'll lighten things. If something happens, that's fine. If you want to walk out, that's fine. If you want to pass me the baby, that's fine.
Yes.
Whatever
it takes.
it is, is fine. And I think as long as you've addressed it, because people create their own barriers as well. If you address it and say, look, we don't need to have any of these barriers. We are happy with all of this. We are aware that you have children. We feel, as we spoke about in our first BIFD
in the article,
we talked about whether or not we felt children should be involved within funerals, and obviously it's up to families, but overall I would say yes.
Definitely.
If we've got to grieve and process loss, they've got to do it. They do it in a different way, but they have to do it too. And if they're not privy, then how can they?
And all they're doing when they're not is creating their own terrifying version.
Exactly.
And actually that leads beautifully to another thing I think we can really help with here, which is that fear element. And that comes from all different angles. How do I explain to my young adult with special needs where his dad is? How do I do that? And how do I explain to the people who are part of his care how I need them to do that?
Yes, of course.
This is when I think people like Child Bereavement UK are so important. They have wonderful resources to teach us how to do that. I try to attend one of their online training courses at least once a quarter.
Oh, well done you.
And recently I've been looking at how do we help young men and boys deal with grief, because they do process it so differently.
I think, and teenagers, because their sense of ownership, and we seem to have integrated quite a lot here, but like teenagers, especially boys, I think.
Yes.
And I know that's a very sweeping statement, because it's not always, but young lads who don't often open up and share, and it's predominantly the boys who are less likely to do that, also feel a responsibility to be strong and masculine and potentially or brave on behalf
looking
of
after
and carers. And girls will do that. Depending on the dynamics. If dad's died, say, and you're at the funeral and you're being strong for mum.
Yes. You're not allowed.
You're not processing your needs,
exactly.
and everybody needs that. And I think, yes, a child may be upset when they're at a funeral, but so are you. Why shouldn't they be upset?
Of course, it's a normal reaction, isn't
and
it?
to be upset and see you're upset and see that that's normal and see that that's okay and have everyone supporting, which is why we have the ritual of funerals and gatherings anyway. Then that is the best place for them to do it, rather than in their own mind behind closed doors and whispered things, knowing that someone's died but not really sure what they're supposed to be doing, and not witnessing everyone around them putting on a brave face and them thinking, well, no one else is crying, why am I crying?
I must be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's my fault, maybe it's whatever, maybe I'm strange, So I think, children, funerals and inclusivity, from children to children and adults with special needs, to people with disabilities, to people who need additional support. It comes down to us as an industry, funeral directors, ourselves, crematoria staff, And I think we're naturally quite good at it, but we perhaps might have lost this kind of, or need to add an extra bit in there about just asking one more question. Is there anything else? Anyone that we need to consider, or any concerns you have about any individuals or groups of people coming that we might need to offer some
absolutely
support for?
Absolutely. And I think one of the really big things when we're talking about inclusivity in general is us being prepared to be flexible.
Yeah.
So one of the first times I noticed one of my funeral directors kind of reacted to something I'd organised.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from a funeral director I've worked with many times, and they said, the family's told us that they're walking in with you in front of the coffin. And I said, that's right. And they said, we wondered if it was right or if they'd got that wrong, because that's not how we normally do this. Yeah. And I couldn't help myself. I think I slightly giggled.
Yeah.
There was this sort of, escaped, you know. Literally just, and I said, okay, so do you remember Princess Diana's funeral? And she said, of course. And of course, our generation all remember that. Yeah. And I said, do you remember the faces of those two young boys, her sons, and how totally lost and forlorn and broken they looked? Yeah. And she said, yes, I remember. I said, well, you know, it's funny. Ever since then, I've always promised myself I would never let children walk behind the coffin of their parent. Yeah. Or at the very least, I would tell them they didn't have to. Yeah. And that's the key. Mm-hmm. It's telling people whatever your needs are, however different they may feel to you, you are not being a nuisance. No. You are not asking for something we've never been asked for before, because I guarantee we have. Mm-hmm. And we are happy and willing and able to accommodate it. Yeah.
I think the difference is that we have this idea of what the right way to do a funeral is and what the tradition is, because that's the way we see it. If you ever see it on a movie or on a telly, it's done. This is the way it's done. This order, this way that happens. And the reality of it is it can happen any way the family and the community need it to happen.
Absolutely.
And want it to happen. So, you know, everyone going in and sitting down first, you going in on your own, you being left on your own after everyone's left. We've both done that, haven't we? Many funerals where the idea that, quite traditionally, of course, nobody gets up in a crematorium until the family gets up and then leads out, and then everyone comes out and shakes their hands and gives them hugs, stuff. Imagine how overwhelming that might be to somebody, just too overwhelming. And on many occasions, you and I have both said to the congregation, the family just want a minute in here on their own with their loved one before they leave. So if I could ask you all to make your way out, they'll come out when they're ready.
And the first time I suggested that to a funeral director, she nearly had kittens. I think I even phoned you and said, this is just so funny.
Yeah, we had a little laugh.
Because actually, we're managing this bit. We know how long we've got. We're absolutely going to make it work. Their fear, the FD's fear, was, oh my goodness, you're going to go over time because everybody will say goodbye to the family as they leave. Yeah. And I said, no, they won't. I promise to give really clear instructions. Yeah. And in fact, after the service, that particular FD said to me, well, that's the fastest we've ever emptied the creme. Yeah. Well done, you.
Because what normally happens is the family stand just outside the door and everyone stands in a queue to leave. And
now you're causing a backlog. Yeah. But this time they all just left. Yeah. Let's respect the time this family needs. Yeah. And actually what was particularly beautiful for me on that occasion was that one of the sons is autistic. Yeah. And he had been discussing with Mum and with me, he was very worried about the idea of these curtains. Mm-hmm. And so we had said, well, you can leave them open. Of course, I hadn't understood the complexities of that fear. Yeah. And his real fear was just the control element.
Oh, right.
So when we had asked everybody else to leave, he stood up on the podium with me and he closed the curtains.
Oh,
which gave him such control in a situation where he hadn't had any. Yeah. And when I explained to him and his mum we could do that, his fear, I saw his fear leave him. His whole demeanour changed. Yeah. He could focus on something that mattered rather than, but who's going to take control of closing curtains round Dad?
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, we couldn't have done that if everybody hadn't left.
The other thing I do with families, and that is so beautiful and really, I mean, you're so good at picking out these needs and everything. But the other thing I often do when I'm talking to you, because we get to speak to the next of kin, and maybe there's a couple of the family there, but there might be somebody, when I've done a family where there's been a group of teenagers,
Oh, yes.
it's quite complicated, and I've said to the parent that's left, I've said, you're very welcome to talk to your boys and pass things on to me, but why don't you pass my number to them?
Lovely.
Phone number, email, because they might not want to speak, but they
No.
might want to type. And if they want to ask me anything or say anything to me, they can. And if you want me to say that to them now,
Yeah.
I can just
That's
leave them
beautiful.
That number. Because
It's very empowering.
Yeah, yeah.
Also gives them a chance, if they have a question that they think, this might upset my
Yeah,
parent, or my parent might think this is silly,
Yeah.
they can now bring that to a safe
Yeah.
space, and you've given them permission,
Yeah.
and they've seen parental consent, if you
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm going along with this. I'm happy for you to talk to the
And
celebrant.
I always say there's no stupid questions. I said I know the answers because I do it all the time. This is the first time you've ever had to deal with this.
Yes.
Why would you know the answers to anything? So don't be embarrassed to ask me anything you want.
No, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing I think we need to learn to do better is to admit we don't always have the answers.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of finding out what are local resources, what's available to support us.
Yeah.
And our families aren't always going to want those resources straight away.
No.
But if they know we know where they are, it saves them trying to find
Yeah.
them. And one thing I'm a massive fan of is taking a book with you. You and I both tend to do this. If you're going to a family and you know there's a child or you know there's a young adult who has certain needs, take something with that you can leave with the family that they can go over and over perhaps as many times as needed. Water Bugs and Dragonflies, which is an all-time favourite of mine, I am very thrilled that they have brought out a colouring version of this book.
How wonderful.
Which is so beautiful. And as you know, one of my absolute
Yeah.
favourite experiences with a
Yeah.
family. I was working with a family where Dad had died and they had 3 children, one of whom lives with Down syndrome. And I know they wouldn't mind me sharing that his name was Simon. And Simon is quite remarkable and has taught me to be a better celebrant and particularly to think more about what I take with me. So I went to visit and I took the colouring book version of Water Bugs and Dragonflies and obviously showed it to Mum first, said, are you happy for me to share this or would you like to share it later? And she said, a beautiful book, really love this, Simon would really enjoy it, but he doesn't colour in, it's not something he does.
Okay.
And I said, well, he's absolutely welcome to have the book. I brought it for him to keep, doesn't matter if he colours it or not. 2 days before the funeral, Mum calls me and says, Dinah, you'll never believe this, Simon has coloured in every page. And boy, had he coloured it in. I mean, this is clearly something he is exceptionally good at.
Yeah.
And she said to me, is there anything we can do? How can we include this in the service? It was too late to put it in the order of service. That's all been printed. So I said, look, bring it with you. I'm going to bring my recipe book holder from the kitchen. We'll put that on the coffin.
Yeah.
He can choose his favourite page and we'll leave it open.
Yeah.
And then as people are leaving, they can see it and it'll be there the whole of the service. Loved that idea. Simon and I together went in quickly before anybody else.
Great.
Chose his favourite page, put it on the coffin. 5 minutes into the ceremony, totally unplanned, Simon got up, walked over to the coffin, changed the page.
Great.
He did this 5 times during the service. So we got to see his 6 actually, favourite pages because of the one we'd started with as well. And when we finished and everybody was leaving and thanking and saying thank you for coming, and I was standing kind of encouraging people out and they were saying, oh, thank you, lovely service. And Simon noticed this and came and stood next to me and started thanking people for coming.
Great.
And then he said, and I'll never forget it, he said to the next person who came, do you think Daddy liked my colouring?
Yeah. Oh.
I will never forget that.
No.
And I realised in that moment, taking a book is such a big deal. Books give people so much comfort And he had the opportunity to just keep going back and re-understanding and reconnecting. Never hesitate to think, what could I take with me to help this family on this journey, whatever their needs.
And we are naturally, because of our chosen career, I guess, you wouldn't choose it if we weren't, we're naturally more pretty empathetic.
Yes.
And we do hear, and I always say that my greatest talent in my job is that I hear things that haven't been said, because you're looking at how people react and act and their facial expression and their body language and all of those things, and we're very in tune with that.
Very.
Yeah, and I think that, so these things, we, are not big asks from us, I don't think. It just is just another facet of what we already do, which is being caring and empathetic and considerate.
Exactly, and inclusive.
Inclusive, yeah.
And actually, on that note, one of the things that the Child Bereavement UK website is so good for, they have books for sharing with children of all age groups of several different types of special needs.
Right.
And one of the other things I absolutely loved that has been updated very recently is you will find books for children who have a mum and a mum, or a dad and a dad.
Brilliant.
Or you have parents of mixed heritage, and that's being shown in these books that they're sharing.
Brilliant.
That's so important.
Yeah.
When a child or a young person with a special need sees themselves, then it starts to connect. They have a beautiful book on there that they've added recently, and on the front cover is a little girl in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I was in a wheelchair for a while my daughter was very young, I will always remember when Mattel brought out the wheelchair Barbie.
Yes.
And watching Hannah's face when she saw that and thinking, now suddenly mummy feels like mummy belongs. Yeah. And what was even better was they gave her a job.
Yeah.
Barbie in a wheelchair was a professional photographer.
Good.
So it was, status and totally brilliantly done.
Yes, it's seeing people like yourself and just as part of the norm situation. I think when we post this, we must put a link to that Child Bereavement UK.
Absolutely.
We talk about it a lot.
And I think also, to them, but I think also we need at the same time to link to resources that we feel perhaps people aren't seeing at the moment. So one of the things I'd love you to take a look at, listener, is the very brilliant Queer Funeral Guide by Ash Hayhurst.
Oh God, that's excellent.
If you literally type in Ash's name, it'll come up. Or you just type in Queer Funeral Guide. He's made it available completely free of charge.
I think we've both got a link on our website.
Both of us have that. Yeah. And that's another resource that's essential that you're aware of, that you're thinking about, that you're including.
What I love, Dinah, is that when we start talking about inclusivity, people assume that we're going to start talking about disability in this instance. But
it's so much broader.
But
isn't
it's it is everything. It is every single person of every age, and race and ability and preference. And just being mindful that every single person needs something different, and just being open to what those differences can be, and embracing them.
Yes.
And why not make life as easy as you can for everybody?
Yeah, especially when they're so vulnerable because of grief.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hard time, and our job is to make it slightly a teeny weeny bit less hard than it already is. And we can do that just by being open-hearted and open-minded.
Yes, we can. And on that note, thank you for listening and joining us today.
Thank you.
Do take a look at the links. We'll share everything that we've mentioned in the links below.
Yeah.
And do share the podcast too, please.
Yeah, please, yes, do share. And feedback to us. If you've got any thoughts on how we are holding these conversations, what we're talking about, we'd love to hear your views on it.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Ask a Celebrant is unscripted, and we base it on the questions we receive from our clients and you, our listeners. We'd love to hear from you. Do join the conversation.
See you next month.